Thank you very much, Alessandro, and thank you so much for opening up your class and everybody in the class for us to have these conversations. And then also my greetings and thanks to my dear colleagues and friends, panelists here that I always learn from, Mariam, Hadi, and Sattar and Larry for sure. Also, my thanks to the organizers of the International Emergency Campaign, who are trying to break what I consider as a set of silences. One is the overall historical silences that we have been observing on the situation of Iran, but also overall the Middle East, and I will come back to this point. And also overall international silence on what is happening in the region as far as the struggle of the people in the region is concerned. So I'm not gonna, you've already heard a lot of the detailed information and then also particular cases from panelists so far. But I'm gonna sort of start by making 3 main points as a way of contextualizing my analysis of the struggle of especially women political prisoners, and then not only in Iran, but also throughout the Middle East. But when I refer to women political prisoners, it doesn't mean that it is only women that are being imprisoned in the Middle East. Men as well, and some women with their children are also in prison. But let me start by making these points first, and then we'll come back to it further if it's needed more explanation and discussion. So my first point is that the history of women's struggle for their rights is a century long in the Middle East. And this includes rights to freedom, democracy, equality, education, work, health, and more importantly also rights to their body and sexuality and reproductive rights. This means that our discussion of female political prisoners or general political prisoners in the Middle East should be framed as a continuity within this dynamic and vibrant resistance to all forms of oppression and exploitation. The second general point that I would like to make is that our reference here is on this panel is specifically on political prisoners, and which has a very special meaning in the context of the authoritarian state's function and governance. And it is not separated from all the social conditions that especially Hadi explained in details with reference to the condition of Iran as a society on the brink of massive breakdown, what he called hanging on a cliff. So the political prisoner is a reference to someone who stands in opposition to the ruling regime. It means that they reject the authoritarian dominance, demand justice, organize and mobilize to make social and political change. All that we have been talking about here. And also the example of Nahid Taqavi, Mariam's mother, that is as an activist demanding social justice, fighting to transform the patriarchal, religious, capitalist relations in the under the rule of the Islamic regime in Iran. This is considered a crime, and therefore the punishment and incarceration. So this is what we need to think about, that when writers, teachers, workers, nurses, environmentalists, activists, artists, filmmakers, students, pensioners that cry poverty, violence, discrimination, etc., they will be incarcerated, and it is only the state that has the monopoly of the the incarceration and the punishment of the citizens who are demanding justice. Therefore, the slogan of free all political prisoners is a deeply political, because it is also directly points to the state and its oppressive and violent measures of suppression. And lastly, my third point here is that this sort of a long struggle for justice by the people of the Middle East, it has different political and ideological forces have been involved throughout this long century of the struggle, ranging from anti-colonialism to nationalist forces, liberal, socialist, and communist forces that all have been fighting in terms of a transforming the rules of dominance throughout the Middle East. Islam as a dominant religion has been a persistent political and ideological force in the path of these movements. And the US, the role of the US as an imperialist power has always been in support of the right-wing, reactionary, and Islamist forces against the wishes of the struggling people, in particular, the liberal, socialist, and overall different range of the leftist tendencies throughout the Middle East. And I think that it is very important to make that link in terms of where the US power stands in terms of its relationship with the struggle of people in the region. So I think that, and this is very important because I think that the reciprocity that it is needed in support of the struggle of the Middle East, it's not happening at the same rate and with the same enthusiasms that the people of the Middle East express towards the struggle of people in the context of Europe or the US, in terms of, for example, the way that they responded to the killing and murdering of George Floyd, or the support and solidarity with the Me Too movement that also created a lot of enthusiasm and support throughout the region, and then also Black Lives Matter, in the way that they sort of turned these movements as a way of building solidarity, and then also expanding the kind of conversations around suppression of their own rights. Now, let me give you, so these are the three main points that I wanted to make here, but also I want to give you a little bit of the sense of the depth of the suppression that it is happening, political suppressions, and that it is happening in the context of the Middle East. In fact, a lot of observers of the Middle East, they argue that this level of suppression and arrest and incarceration and imprisonment, which is unparalleled in the recent decades, and especially since the 2011, 2009, I would say 2009 uprising in Iran, and then followed by 2011, what is called Arab uprising. And then what they argue is that there is a sort of a quiet crisis. This level of imprisonment and political, cultural suppression, it is a quiet crisis in the Middle East. And especially when we are talking about the Arab region with reference to Palestine and Egypt, Iraq, Kurdish region of Iraq, and then also the Arab region of Iraq, what they talk about is that we are facing a generation, and this generation is called Generation Jail, because of the length of their stay in prison. So 10 years, 20 years. And for example, in Turkey right now, there are a lot of writers, intellectuals, and artists that have been in prisons for a long time. Now, the situation, so let me give you a little bit of a statistical horrifying statistical information about what is going on in different countries in the region. And this data is constantly changing, and so take my numbers as estimates and proximity to the numbers that I'm talking about here. For example, in Syria right now, there are about 118,000 individuals that have been arrested or forcibly disappeared. Egypt is then the numbers and the conditions of prison is horrific. And you have to remember that in the last 2 years, especially with the COVID-19 situation, the situation of the lives of prisoners have deteriorated fastly in this under these conditions. In Egypt, Human Rights Watch estimates that there are 60,000 political prisoners and a lot of new prison complexes have been built in the country. And they argue that there is a condition that it is happening that is called assembly line of torture in Egypt. And you have to remember that Egypt is the recipient of the largest arm gifts and financial support from the US, and no one, either European or the US, is sort of saying anything about the crimes against humanity that it is being committed in Egypt. And Israel, another ally of the US government, US state, is prisoning close to 6,000 Palestinians and also under a strict, what is called security, that they are called security detainees. And as I said, that the arbitrary arrest and lengthy and punitive sort of pre-trial detentions that is continuing in Turkey, when the number of the arrests in Turkey is going up, and another estimate is 50,000 in Turkey. And Iran, you've heard about it a lot, but I would only add to all the numbers and the situations that you've heard, that the situation is for the national minorities in Iran, the Kurds especially, is really alarming. And a lot of teachers, the students and workers of the Kurdish background are disproportionately has been arrested and in prisons and also under very harsh condition that they are sort of being treated. Now, I think that what is important for us is that how to think about all of this and what needs to happen and what we can do. You know that I would say that what is going on in the Middle East, it's very important to be understood in terms of the relationship of the US state foreign policy in the Middle East as an imperialist, capitalist imperialist power. And the occupation of Afghanistan, the occupation of Iraq, protracted wars, destruction, and the condition that happened in Abu Ghraib, which also some of the people in the Middle East are in specifically in Iraq are living with the consequences of that sort of violation and the horrible condition of what happened in the experience of Abu Ghraib, which is also the same as it was a continuation of that, and then what happened in Guantanamo Bay prison. And these are all atrocities, and people have not forgotten these atrocities. That is sort of gets more complicated with the rise of neoliberalism, this predatory, corrupt capitalism that it is. It's also global. Understanding the global nature of these forces is very important. And then the rivalries between US.
We were just going to, we apologize, but we are coming up on our time. If you want to make your concluding remarks, and then we can continue. So sorry about that. Thank you.
That's okay. That was my concluding remarks, actually, that this the understanding of this imperialist rivalries throughout the world, but also its impact on the lives of people in the Middle East is extremely important. So Iran is not an isolated case. It is related to what is going on in the region, but it is also related globally. Therefore, it is our responsibility to attend and make all these global connections in order to be able to build an international solidarity to end all these oppressive and exploitative conditions of life for people. Thank you very much.